Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Cunningham. I'm Executive Director of Oxford University's North American office based in New York. And on behalf of my colleagues in the North American office and throughout the Oxford University community, I'm delighted to welcome you to this session of Meeting Minds Global. To be perfectly honest, I wish we were meeting in person. My colleagues and I have always enjoyed hosting events throughout North America, but of course, given the pandemic, that's not possible. And so in thinking about how to bring Oxford closer to our alumni and friends around the world, our colleagues in the UK joined together with those of us based in New York and those in Hong Kong and Tokyo to create this series of events throughout the week. And so we branded it Meeting Minds Global. And I hope that you'll be joining many sessions. This session, I should note, will be recorded. So if you have to leave us for any reason, please come back and watch the end. But if you enjoyed the session, please tell other Oxonians and friends who you know are part of the Meeting Minds program to log in and watch the session. And again, we thank you for joining us. If you have any questions that you'd like to pose to the panel or to other members of the session along the way, there is a feature you'll see, a button that you can press, ask a question. Please note not only your name, but your college affiliation, and if you like and don't mind, your year of matriculation, and that'll help identify you. And again, our moderator will decide which questions to take. And I think they like knowing what the Oxford connection is from the person posing the questions. It will run for about an hour, and I will be handing things over to the leadership of our alumni communities in Ottawa, Washington, D.C., and in Mexico City. I've had the honor and privilege of working for Oxford for 28 years, and in my travels, I've been generally pretty well treated, although I was once going to an event in Canada and was going through customs and handed my passport to the customs agent, and he was busy looking down, writing some notes about my application to enter Canada. And he asked me who I was, and I said, Michael Cunningham, and he asked me what I did, and I said, I head Oxford's Alumni Relations and Development Office in the United States. And he was scribbling a note and then looked up and said, and you get paid to do that? And I said, well, actually, as a matter of fact, I do. But it was a helpful reminder that there are many people all across North America who donate their time and energies on behalf of the university. And I know I speak for the Chancellor, Vice Chancellor, and every member of the Oxford community when we say how grateful we are for people who volunteer their time on behalf of the university, their college, the Rhodes Trust, the Marshall Program, whatever aspect of Oxford you provide your time to support. We truly are grateful. So thank you. I like to think that all great ideas like Meeting Minds come out of the university offices, but of course that's not the case. And often wonderful ideas about alumni programs come from the alumni themselves. And this session is a wonderful example, the Three Capitals program. And during the pandemic, the leadership of the Oxford University Societies in Ottawa, Washington, D.C., and Mexico City put their heads together and came up with this wonderful idea of sharing programs together and featuring noteworthy Oxonians who are leaders in their fields, who are doing interesting things in their lives. And these sessions, I must say, have been a great success. And so my colleagues and I have been just delighted to watch these sessions emerge organically. And we just thought it would be a nice part of the Meeting Minds program to feature the Three Capitals program. So we're could not be happier to have this session as part of this week-long program. So at this point, I'd like to introduce the alumni leadership from each OUS branch. I'll start with Sean Denniston, who joins us from Washington, D.C., Akesh Maharaj, who joins us from Ottawa, and Karine Yuki, who joins us from Mexico City. And each one has invited an Oxonian in their wonderful part of the world to have a discussion about Oxford and how it's impacted on their lives and other topics that they'd like to cover. So without further ado, I'll hand the session over to Sean Denniston in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Michael. And good evening, or good morning, good afternoon, happy Tuesday, whatever, sorry. We have three great speakers tonight, and I have the honor of doing brief introductions. Ebony Ellis Boyd is a political activist and entrepreneur and a co-founder of NEXT, a nonpartisan program to help current and former sex workers by providing legal and educational assistance and encouraging their interest in the political process. Ms. Ellis Boyd was a political consultant for 10 years with successes for both parties in congressional and local races. As a business consultant, she helped more than 70 lower and middle income clients start their own businesses. Ms. Ellis Boyd's activism and entrepreneurship also extends to the art world, where she is developing Budget Collector, an app using artificial intelligence to match artists directly with collectors, intending to democratize and diversify what people see and collect. Ms. Ellis Boyd was at St. Anthony's College reading for an MSc in Modern Japanese Studies. At Oxford, she was a member of Oxford Women in Politics and an ENTS officer for her college. Before Oxford, Ms. Ellis Boyd earned a BA in Classics from Howard University. Astrid Gutman is Chief Science Officer at the Institute for Clinical Evaluative Services. The Institute is an Oxford, Canada-based not-for-profit community of research, data, and clinical experts translating its community-based research and data into informed policy, making healthcare better and people healthier. Dr. Gutman's applied research aims to use population-based research that informs and evaluates healthcare and social policies to improve the care of children and their families. As COVID-19 is taking the world's energy to research and eradicate, Dr. Gutman is researching the pandemic's impact on children, immigrant and refugee communities, as these groups often have higher healthcare needs, underlying medical conditions, or social vulnerabilities. Dr. Gutman attended New College as a Rhodes Scholar, reading philosophy and theology, and literally seeing the forest through the trees, then went on to earn an MSc in forestry and environmental studies. Dr. Gutman has a BA from Harvard in European History and Literature and her medical degrees from McGill and McMaster's universities. Alejandro Ramirez Magaña is the Chief Executive Officer of Cinepolis, Mexico's largest Cineplex chain with 497 theaters in 91 cities and one of the largest theater chains in the world. I think it's fourth, with 624 theaters and 5,000 screens. While impressive in its own right, Mr. Magaña is also Mexico's representative to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and Technical Secretary of the Social Cabinet in the Executive Office of the President of Mexico. Mr. Magaña worked at the World Bank and the United Nations on Poverty and Human Development and used positions on the Global Cinema Federation and the Morelia International Film Festival to use film to raise awareness of huge social movements around the world, and with Mexicano Primero to raise the quality of education in Mexico. Mr. Magaña was a member of St. Peter's College, where he read for an MSc in Development Economics under Amartya Sen. He played tennis with St. Peter's College. However, one does wonder if going to the pictures at the Odeon or the Phoenix Picture House in Jericho influenced his leadership of Cinepolis. Mr. Magaña also studied at Harvard, earning a BA in economics and later an MBA. Thank you all panelists. And thank you for taking part today. You guys are all fascinating and really diverse backgrounds. Next, we'd like each of you to make an opening statement. And if you don't mind, please in your remarks touch on the following. How has Oxford impacted your leadership style? How did the Oxford experience impact your life? And how do you draw on those experiences in your life now as a person and a leader? And have you been back to Oxford since you left? And if you have, what was the experience like? And if not, how have you stayed connected with the university since then? Hope that's not too much, and thank you all very much. And perhaps go in the order which you were introduced.
Hi, I'm Ebonique. I did the things that Sean spoke of. And my leadership skills at Oxford. I come from a farming community in America, and so I wasn't exposed to a lot of things until I came to Oxford and went to Howard. And at Oxford, I met a woman who was formerly a sex worker before she attended Oxford. And I thought, it sort of changed my mind of what women can be, to see a woman that was able to, literally get her graduate degree despite her previous background. It sort of changed my perspective of women. And it took me a while, but when I met a former stripper who was running for state elected office and she was getting derided by my political colleagues, I said to myself, I know a girl from Oxford and she graduated with honors and she has a PhD. So obviously, you can be capable and smart. And I went about supporting her in my own way by hosting an event in DC. And then when a donor offered me the opportunity to start a new organization to support more women like her, I gravitated at that chance to help other women. And I haven't been at Oxford since, but I regularly give money, which I encourage everyone who's watching to just give what you can to your college. And I think that's the last question. Astrid, would you like to go?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say it's really a pleasure to be here. And, as a physician and an epidemiologist, it's really nice to spend an hour not thinking about COVID-19 and to reflect back on, 3 amazing years that I had the privilege to experience in New College and at Oxford. Reflecting on, the influence of Oxford in terms of leadership, I would say you heard the sort of somewhat strange academic background I have, certainly as a physician with 2 humanities degrees and a forestry degree, which was a little sidebar thing because I panicked about going into medicine and decided I was going to do environmental policy instead. But I would say that, a strong background in the humanities certainly has made me, when I reflect on what medicine is, to me, it's definitely an art, not a science. And I actually think the same thing about leadership. And I'm sure there's lots of, Harvard Business School MBA professors that would disagree with me, but that certainly sort of carried with me. But I would say that really the larger, influence on my career was the peers that I had. And, I'll, reflect exactly like Ebonique, like I met so many different people from every corner of the earth. And that was incredible. And the peer group was just so engaged with a breadth of interest, and some of that's an age. I mean, that's that time of life when you're just, thinking about lots of big things. But I really did feel like a lot of my peers were very interested in public policy in the world. And, I had always thought I was going to go into medicine and did end up finding my way back there. But I think certainly, my decisions to, think about the health system and some of the work I do definitely came very much from the influence of the peers. And then the other piece, and again, reflecting on what Ebonique said as well, it sort of opened up the world. I mean, the world was a different place then. I had been to Europe because I had European grandparents, but I certainly had not been anywhere else. And this was the late 80s, Eastern Europe was opening up, the wall fell, and to have traveled there and even to what then seemed like even more far-flung places. I got to go to Zaire, I got to go to Egypt, and everybody was sort of taking these incredible trips and coming back and talking about it. And it was at a point where there was, again, barely an internet. So it wasn't, that kind of globalism wasn't there. And that was just incredible. And then again, to be with people from these places and to celebrate Nelson Mandela being released from prison with South African friends, like that was just amazing. And so I took all of that with me when I came back and then went into medicine, which again, was 4 years of memorizing what bone attaches to what ligament, and the world gets very, very small. But I carried all of that with me. And then, making my choices about, what kind of physician and what kind of a career I wanted to have, which led me to the Institute where I am, and then, which is a fantastic place. And that's why, I wanted to be part of the leadership team there. I'd say in terms of impact of life, I met my husband at Oxford. He was another Canadian. We met only a couple times there, but then 5 years later ended up in Toronto together. And, it's a wonderful thing to have that shared history, and it turned out a lot of shared friends. And so we went back for the first time when the Rhodes Trust celebrated their 100th anniversary, and that was an incredible celebration. It was the first time we were away after having had children, and that was a wonderful celebration. And then we have lots of friends, here in Toronto and, in Canada who from that time there. And I'm quite engaged with the Rhodes community here. So we have the Canadian Rhodes community from a large bequest and then a number of donations as a scholarship for an Oxford undergraduate on graduation to do postgraduate work in Canada. And so I've been on the board for many, many decades, and it's a wonderful program. I think it's, it's our way of showing gratitude to the university, and it's fantastic. Whenever the students come, we usually meet them depending on which part of the Canada they land in. And, it's amazing to be able to meet, wonderful, smart 21-year-olds coming from Oxford, and they really, enjoy the connection to Canada. So I'll pass the mic on then.
Thank you very much. Very grateful for this invitation. How did Oxford impacted my leadership style, and how did Oxford experience my life? Well, in many ways. I would say the first one is that when I arrived at Oxford, I understood that I had to take responsibility for my own academic development. In Mexico, the university system is very rigid, and they tell you exactly which courses you need to take in every semester. And even having gone undergraduate in the US, which is much more flexible, especially the liberal arts system, which I find fascinating as well as Oxbridge's tutorial system, it's a more structured, and in the sense that when I arrived at Oxford, I had all this liberty to not only take courses, but also shape the focus that I wanted to give to my graduate degree. So for me, the tutorial system was a revelation. I'd never imagined this existed, and I thought it was such a privilege to be able to interact and talk and discuss with professors that I had read for many years, their papers and their books, and all of a sudden I was sitting in front of them, defending my paper and just presenting to them. It was just quite an extraordinary experience for me, and it was also the opportunity to meet world authorities in economic development fields that I was studying, and at the end of the day also forming friendships with a lot of these professors. So for me that was very important, because I also gained the confidence in the tutorial system to present to world authorities my different ideas and my ideas for my thesis and later on for future academic papers. So for me, that was one of the biggest things that Oxford impacted my professional life. Also, it influenced where I search, professional opportunities after university. After Oxford, I worked for the World Bank and the UNDP, and very much because of the recommendations of Oxford professors. They told me, you should look here, you should look there, and that's what I did. And I ended up working for the World Bank and doing poverty analysis of Jamaica, and then the United Nations Development Program on the Human Development Report Office, which had a lot of Oxford professors involved. So that was very impactful for me. Then I would say that also Oxford made me into a more global citizen. I think the diversity of the student body, of the faculty, not only in terms of nationalities, but also in diversity of thought. I think Oxford made me into a more global citizen, made me ask for questions of global relevance, and it exposed me to regions of the world to which I had relatively little contact with prior to coming to Oxford. And then I will also say that it gave me, or it made me realize the importance of having a mentor and choosing your mentors right throughout your career. And when your turn comes, becoming a mentor to others. So I had, I would say, great mentors as an undergraduate at Harvard, Professor Amartya Sen, who actually is the one that told me you should go to Oxford to do this work. I ended up going to Oxford. Then Professor Frances Stewart, who was my professor and my thesis advisor at Queen Elizabeth House, and she recommended me to go to HDRO. And then I ended up actually doing research with Professor Stewart, and we wrote a paper together and we published it. So for me, she was a big mentor. And when the time came, I mean, about 12, 14 years ago, when for the first time someone came and asked me to be their mentor, I was shocked because I thought, oh my God, I'm getting old if somebody's asking me to be their mentor. But then I remember how, these professors had been so important in my career. And I thought it's time to start, giving back and make the time to meet those, young students or young graduate students. And then finally, how Oxford impacted my life? Well, mainly through lifelong friendships. I met so many great friends that I still see regularly, from India, from Kenya, from South Africa, from all over Latin America, from Portugal, from the UK. And including my best friend from El Salvador. I'm the godfather to her children, and she's the godmother to my children. So in any way, I think Oxford impacted in many, many respects.
Thank you. And I think at this point, my colleagues and friends north and south of the border, I think, have questions or their own questions and others.
Thank you, Sean. Hello, I'm Akash Maharaj. From Ottawa. We'll now go into the segment where we have a small number of advanced questions that were submitted by the members of our 3 chapters. And then Karine will take over with live questions from the audience. So you'll have some time to steel your nerves for the chaos and drama that comes from live questions as you answer the first few. I'll start in the order that we have used so far. Ebonique, your work with Next involves making the case for really significant changes in political and social attitudes towards sex work, one of the most highly charged subjects of our time and perhaps of any time. Since this is an Oxford event, I guess I'm constitutionally required to throw in a classical reference, and I'll say that we have some sense of ancient Roman attitudes towards sex and politics from salacious accounts of Julius Caesar and King Nicomedes. So you talked about the woman you met at St. Anthony's who opened your eyes to the possibility of the path you've gone down now. Was there anyone else at Oxford who influenced your ability to engage other people in difficult conversations, especially ones where different people might begin by holding radically opposed positions? It might be on a fellow student, a don, a college staff member. It could be on questions of communications techniques or presentation styles. Did it prepare you for what I can only guess is the fevered debate into which you threw yourself?
I mean, I've always been a person that had no problem with controversy. So this is nothing new, but there are people in Oxford who like this, the donor wanted me to work with bipartisan. So, and I don't have many, although Sean said that I worked on the opposite side. In American politics, you don't usually work on the opposite side. So I didn't have any friends other than my Oxford friends who were on the opposite side. So it was difficult for me to make the right connections to have that partner to engage people on the opposite side without Oxford. And at Oxford, because of the because we're all so different, we're all coming from such different backgrounds. Normally, I guess I wouldn't have a friend in the opposing party, but because we're both Americans and both Americans of color, we found each other and were able to bond over something that was very important in that moment at Oxford, if that makes sense.
It does, thank you.
To answer your question.
Astrid, so your work in research and public health is very much at the intersection of science and politics. And I think we all know those two have always been uncomfortable bedfellows, but perhaps especially now. So I think we all have a sense that there can be great political mileage for some politicians in expressing skepticism about experts and expertise itself. And citizens are growing increasingly suspicious that traditional institutions that generate expert credentials, like Oxford University, are not always venues for meritocratic excellence, but sometimes closed centers for self-serving and well-connected elites. So in trying to lead a charge for fact-based, scientifically informed public policy, how do you respond to those social currents?
So, I mean, there are a few things in that. I think that universities, I think some of this is a communication and culture thing. And I think what we've seen really clearly during COVID is that there are people who can make science understandable, and that's crucially important. And I think making science understandable to politicians who may not be trained scientifically and who, to be honest, have had to make incredibly difficult choices, with a huge, number of unknowns. And I think part of making science understandable is also making some of the transparency that you're talking about, like what are these ivory towers and who are these elites? And I think part of that is that people speak, in tongues sometimes, and I think that doesn't help. And so I think sort of having people who can represent what science is, but speak clearly about it and demystify some of it, I think goes a long way to being able to bridge, I think, this mistrust of the ivory towers and all that goes with it.
Okay. Thank you. So, Alejandra, you've had a very varied career in domestic politics in Mexico, in international development at the World Bank and the UNDP, and now in the private sector in a multinational entertainment firm. Did your time at St. Peter's College shape the way you approach leadership in such varied spheres? And did your experiences as an overseas student shape your approach in your transnational career?
Yes, thank you for the question, Nakash. I think Oxford definitely, shaped a lot of the things that I did afterwards, and in particular, when I joined the private sector over 15 years ago and started working in the film exhibition business. The company that I'm currently the CEO of, Cinepolis, was mainly focused in Mexico and Central America, and the international expansion of our company had been, a sort of like logical expansion to the south, to Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Honduras, and Panama. And but when I came to the company, we started exploring other markets outside of Latin America. We did start expanding initially after Central America to Colombia and South America, but after Colombia, before going to Brazil or Chile or Argentina, or Peru, we actually went and explored the Indian market. And why? Because we realized that India had a very deep-rooted film-going culture, a vibrant film-producing community, and not enough modern multiplexes, so very, very few. So we thought there's an opportunity there, and so instead of continue our growth south to South America, we did a big jump to South Asia, and we started opening cinemas in India. After a few years in India and with a very successful expansion, we did come back to Latin America and went to Brazil, Chile, Argentina, and Peru. And then we went to other regions as well, the US, Spain, and then back to Asia, Indonesia, and some countries in the Gulf region. So I think the fact that, through my exposure in Oxford to other geographies, and then my work in the World Bank and the UNDP, really allowed me to travel a lot to many parts of the world that I hadn't really known at all before going to Oxford and working in international organizations, then I was able to bring this international expertise to my company. For the first time I told my board, that I wanted to explore going into the Indian market, they looked at me like if I was crazy. And today is one of the most important markets for us outside of Mexico. So I would say that the friendships that I did in Oxford and just the exposure that it gave me to other regions of the world influenced a lot what I'm doing in my career currently.
Thank you. That's lovely, and that's a lot of territory. Ebony, you mentioned that you come from a farming community and a farming background. Did you have a mental image of what life at Oxford or St. Antony's would be like? And when you arrived there, was the reality different from that mental image? Did your experience of culture contrast or culture shock change your leadership style when you returned to the United States?
I did experience a culture shock, mostly because of the sex work thing. There, in Europe, it's much more open, and so that was unusual for me to see that people are just like, that it was just unusual. In America, it's not like that. So it was a culture shock in that way. I don't. So were you just asking me about just culture shock in general versus the farming community of where I'm from?
Or did it cause you to think differently about your own culture when you arrived home?
Yeah, I love America more. I know that's horrible to say, but
Not at all.
I love the freedom and the way Americans are. The more I travel abroad, the more I love America, and that's why I bonded with my American colleagues. But and English is just we are very different, and I didn't really realize that before. You see movies and you think that we're very much alike, but we are very different culturally. I'm sorry if that.
That makes perfect sense. There's the famous quip by Churchill that Britain and the United States are two countries separated by a common language. Okay. So, Astrid, you spoke to just how broad your academic background is: forestry, environmental studies, philosophy, theology, and now you're on scientific research in medicine. So, did that expansive education at Oxford help you to take a broader perspective on your work, not just measuring the scientific or the medical outcomes of public policy measures, but considering the moral and ethical meaning behind those choices?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I alluded to that, and I do think, we talk about this in medicine a lot. There are, there are, a background in the humanities and in other disciplines, and an understanding of the human condition, is, I think, essential, and makes you a different kind of physician. Which is not to say you don't need to know the science, but you actually don't need to know, organic chemistry. I mean, and this is like, all of these things that you're forced to do, for most medical schools. And I think, now many medical schools are rethinking, and some have been very progressive for many years, including McGill, where I went. So yeah, I mean, a diverse perspective, and that kind of humanity, the ethics. I mean, when Alejandro was talking about the tutorial, so I had the privilege of studying philosophy with Jonathan Glover at New College, who's the father of utilitarianism, and we talked long. I mean, he was a world expert, and I think to be able to, see both sides and try to have a way of thinking through some incredibly difficult situations that, as a physician you encounter, was incredibly valuable. So, and I think it, more than just me, I think, and again, there's a lot of conversation going on now within the medical community about, what kind of students, what kind of doctors do you want to have in the end? And, and with that, what kind of students and what kind of experiences and education, is makes good doctors. And I think the model of taking people who have been, very narrowly focused on science may not be the best model. So those are interesting discussions.
Thank you. And the final question for Alejandro. Alejandro, I have to tell you that although I live in the Ottawa Valley, I live at a small town now known as Almont, which was actually named in honor of the Mexican general, Juan Almonte, who was the sometime president of the Regency of Mexico. And that has made me a little curious about the path of Mexican culture and statehood. So with maybe two exceptions, every country in the world has been a colony or a colonizer or both. But Mexico, along with most of the South American countries, is unusual in having become independent 100 years before decolonization swept most of the rest of the globe. So did your time at Oxford change your perspectives on the differences between the New World and the Old World? Has it had an impact on your work as a Mexican in the Iberian Peninsula?
Well, I do think that my time at Oxford made me see, beyond the Western Hemisphere. I had always been very, in Mexico, it's very common, to have a very strong, relationship with North America, with the US and Canada, because of the free trade agreement that we've had for over 20 years and just proximity, and also to the rest of Latin America because of language. So I would say that until my time at Oxford, I had traveled to Europe a couple of times, but I had never really met any non-Western Hemisphere, non-Americans in the whole hemispheric definition of Americans. And I do think that having been at Oxford, the degree I was doing, MSc in Development Economics, was mainly people from South Asia, Africa, and Europe. So I was the only Latin American, in fact, in my degree. And so, yes, it made me sort of broaden, that perspective. And especially it made me very curious about these other regions of the world. And the first chance I had, even during the breaks that we had at Oxford, I tried to travel to the Middle East, and eventually when I had a chance to travel to Africa. And so I definitely think that Oxford, I think, is one of the most global institutions that I've ever attended. And I think it did shape my thinking and the way I approach my research when I was at the World Bank and at the UNDP, and also my time at the OECD, and also in the private sector, as I said earlier, just not to be constrained by sort of geographic paradigms that we have sometimes without even realizing we have them. So I did think it shaped me in those ways.
Thank you. And thank you to all three of you. I'll now hand over to Corinne, who will take you through the gentle bear pit of questions from our audience. Corinne?
Perfect. Thank you, Akash. We've received several excellent questions from the audience for all of our speakers. And I'm actually going to start with what seems like one of the deepest questions that we've received from the chat. And the question is, would you say that you would not be where you are or who you are without your experience at Oxford? Perhaps we can go in the same order that we've been going so far, starting with Ebonique, please.
No, I don't think a school should be so linked to your identity that you're never achieve without a school, without the school. So no, my identity is so much more than my time at Oxford, but I wish I wasn't first. Astrid, would you like to go?
Sure. So I can answer it a little bit differently because, again, I met my husband there, and in the scheme of life and in what makes me happy and who I am and the children that I have, are totally bound up by that. So would I have been unmarried at this point? Maybe not, but I wouldn't have been married to him, and I'm pretty happy I'm married to him and, the life we've had. So I would say that 100%. And, I probably would have ended up in medicine. I might, some things would have, been a little bit different. And I certainly would have been without, some, incredible experiences of certain way of looking at the world and great friends. But would I have been a fundamentally different person? Probably not, but still very, very grateful for the 3 years.
Sure, and I would say that I wouldn't be who I am if I hadn't had the opportunity to study and work and live abroad. I think if I had stayed in Mexico all of my life and continued to have gone to like a good Mexican university for graduate school and had done all my work in Mexico, I think I would probably be different than who I am. And so in that respect, yes, having had this opportunity to study, work, and live abroad, which Oxford is a part of, not the only part, but it's a part of, I think that has shaped in an important way, part of who I am.
Perfect. Thank you, Alejandro, Astrid, and Monique. The second question that came in is around how you see your role today. So the question is, some of you have cultural or ethnic backgrounds or even experiences in emerging economies. How do you see your current role in fighting against inequality? And how has COVID changed your idea of social involvement?
This COVID actually completely changed it, because my friends and I were talking about the growth of OnlyFans. I'm an entrepreneur, and so we're building our own mobile app platform. And one of the biggest things is studying user growth. So we're studying user growth of a lot of emerging platforms and how they've accelerated. And one of them that I was really shocked about was OnlyFans. And when I looked at the trajectory, like we were doing rough estimates internally with a few of my entrepreneur friends, and it looked like almost 1 in 50 young women were on that platform. And that is just going to radically change what young women are going to be facing the next generation. And so it just put in my mind that, if I'm not trying to solve this today, then in the next 20 years, it's going to be nearly impossible for another political consultant like me to find a woman candidate. And because of the drastic unemployment of COVID linked to, COVID changes, a lot of young women are choosing this as a lifestyle to provide an income. And if we don't address this today, the future is going to be forever different. That's my little asterisk.
Yeah, sure. For me, I don't know if it's been COVID. And again, I think certainly, as we keep hearing, COVID has kind of exposed so many systemic and structural issues that were there before. And, we just have to hope that people keep caring about it, and caring about those those long, past the pandemic and long went past, in an infectious disease crisis where, those who hold power are actually, are potentially, at risk because of what's happening, which isn't always the case. So it's much easier to, not see what we probably all need to see. I would say for me personally, and again, as a white person in Canada, we would say I'm a white settler, on a land that was colonized. It has started long ago, and certainly started because of patients that I saw and trying to understand, in particular, what Canada, Indigenous history and Canada's role in it. I wasn't born in Canada, and I went to school in Quebec, and we really learned almost nothing about any First Nations or Métis or Inuit culture or history. And so that's come, a little bit later. I worked up north, as a resident, and I think Canada as a country is trying, to have a, trying to respond to, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and what we need to do. And then this new chapter, which shouldn't be so new because it's, all of those structural issues have been around a long time, but certainly 2020 and George Floyd and COVID, has also brought, many other issues of, systemic racism, includes medicine, includes, many, many other structures. And so I'm trying to educate myself. There's lots that we're doing on the data front and the kind of research we need to be doing. But I think it's really important, and I'm glad we're having the conversations. I just hope it's not just conversations.
In terms of fighting inequalities, I think Latin America is one of the most unequal regions in the world, and I think that the key driver that we must push, as a society, to reduce inequalities is raising the quality and the access to education. And I think sadly, the pandemic has made the existing gaps worse. It has widened and deepened existing gaps because over a year, two academic cycles, one that was concluded online and one that started and has continued and will probably conclude online, is very difficult in countries that don't have the connectivity of developed countries. So Latin American countries have lower connectivity. A lot of the poor households don't have just the technologies for to continue learning at a distance, and that has put at a disadvantage precisely the households that need or that are with the biggest gaps. So I think one thing is obviously to accelerate connectivity and access to information technology, which if used properly and intelligently, I think it can help to reduce rather than widen the social gaps that we see in Latin America and in many other regions of the world that are themselves gaps on human capital.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alejandro. Our final question continues on this thread of talking about large global problems. And this question comes from David Keppel from New College. David is asking, how can Oxford encourage bold 21st century thinking that invites people to embrace radical creative uncertainty as a paradigm in our biggest global problems? Not an easy question, but we figured we would end with this one.
It's a beautiful question. I would hope that, not only should they encourage racial and gender diversity in their students, but also in the professors, because, people of different races and ethnicities offer a different perspective, and that could help embrace more a better understanding of what our largest global problems are. And that's what I would hope. But I haven't read the statistics on how the diversity of the academics are, so I don't know. But I will probably sign off and look that up. But Astrid, what about you?
I totally agree. So I think universities have got to make sure that they create pathways for people for whom it's not traditional to go to university. And you have to start thinking about that really, really early on. It's like what Alejandro was just talking about with human capital, right? So there will not always be people who are going to be able to pass those ridiculous tests, but they are so smart and they have so much to give. And the diversity of thought and the diversity of, where people come from is how you solve problems for sure. So, I think that's the challenge for all universities that want to be world class is trying to figure that out. That's kind of the pipeline and getting people in. And then once you're there, I think you do have to make things inclusive. And maybe this is even getting back to the question about the tyranny against science and the Ivy League, the ivory tower, and the politicization of science. It's you do also, have to make sure that universities are places where people can have discourse on all sides, and that there's not a dominant sort of ideology that takes hold. And I think that that's a big part of it. And I think there's also something about the outward lookingness. We all have talked about how we went over there and our eyes were open to the world and different people from different places. And I think, the question too is, how do universities sort of instill that in students to say, we've got a world that's facing massive challenges. Let's go fix it together, private sector, public sector, everything. But, we have to sort of figure out a way to do that. And I think those are, rising to those challenges, not being insular, those are that's what universities have to, that small thing is what universities have to take on if they're gonna lead.
Okay, I couldn't agree more with what Ebonique and Astrid said. I think the diversifying the talent pool is of the utmost importance, and also not only in terms of gender and race, ethnicity, but also class, nationality, and thought. Because also universities tend to recruit, or I don't know if it's to recruit, but just at least in the US, I've seen that. I don't know if it's also the case in the UK, but that a lot of times, universities tend to be very liberal, and most of who has gone to universities we tend to be very liberal. But at the end, there's sometimes a disconnect when you see, populist, nationalistic leaders, demagogues, maybe like we're seeing in parts of Latin America, in Mexico. I think Trump would also qualify as a leader like that, Brazil with Bolsonaro. And sometimes the universities are in shock, like trying to come to terms why these populist demagogues rise to power. And I think it's important to diversify also, to allow, any type of thinking, so that we're not in shock and we actually can actually tackle the problems that arise also from ideological and political polarization. I also think, that universities like Oxford, they've always maintained academic excellence. They need to continue to encourage intellectual inquiry and also risk-taking, because sometimes it's hard to take certain risks when you're trying to, qualify for tenure as a junior faculty. So I think the university has to allow, for risk-taking, because a lot of the breakthroughs arise from having the courage to think differently, or to ask, sometimes radically different questions, as the question was posed to us. So I think encouraging risk-taking is also a part of it.
Wow, these have been beautiful answers to a beautiful question. It's been a delight to learn more about each of you and your trajectory since Oxford. I know we're right at the hour, even though we didn't get to every single question, but I'll hand it over to Michael Cunningham to close our session.
Well, that was just terrific, and thank you all. Just the topics that we covered, a wide range, really fascinating answers. I just say, if there's a topic that we didn't cover that if any of the speakers would like to address before we wrap up, please feel free to chime in. I don't want anyone to feel that we can't answer. We've got dozens of questions in the queue, so we can't answer them all. But if there's any topic of great importance anyone would like to highlight before we wrap up, I'd like to give anyone a chance to chime in if they would like to at this point. No, well, and that's great. Well, again, I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of the questions, but it bodes well. I think when you are leaving questions in the queue, it shows that a lot of interested attendees. And so, so again, I'd like to thank our three guest speakers who have done a wonderful job of discussing their lives, their careers, the role that Oxford played in their lives and careers, and again, really insightful and interesting comments. So thank you. Astrid, Abanique, and Alejandro for joining us. And again, sincere thanks to our volunteer leadership, particularly Sean and Karine and Akesh, but also all of the folks and the OUS branches in Ottawa, Washington, D.C., and Mexico City, and to those of you out there listening in other cities in North America. We can't do this without you. I don't kid myself, as charming as I may be, people don't want to listen to me all the time. They want to listen to other people. They want to hear and connect with other alumni. And so if you're in a city, even if it's a smaller city, and you'd like to help form an Oxford University or an Oxford Cambridge Society, please reach out and touch base with us, because we like to do all that we can to support our alumni leadership, but really it's the volunteers who really breathe new life into alumni gatherings and alumni events. And I can say new faces, new perspectives, younger folks are very, very welcome. So, so again, staying in touch with Oxford, staying in touch with your Oxonian community, forming new Oxonian communities, is really something that we want to support wholeheartedly. And as I think this program showed, there's a lot to be gained from interacting and interconnecting. Post-COVID, we intend to keep a hybrid model. So we'll be out on the road and visiting people and having in-person events, but we also want to keep connecting with people internationally through these types of media. And so again, our alumni are our greatest asset. And we thank you for your service and all that you do for Oxford. And we thank you particularly today for your time and for your comments. So on that note, again, I'd like to thank all the participants. We're going to put up a slide in just a minute. And if you'd like to get more information about the OUS Society in Ottawa or Washington, D.C. or in Mexico City, please reach out to Sean or Karine or Kesh. And if you'd like more general information about Oxford alumni events, visit our website, which is www.oxfordna.org. So again, I'm Michael Cunningham. I'm Executive Director of Oxford University's North American Office. Thank you for joining us today, and please stay safe and stay well.